Hello there. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. This week we're going to talk on the topic of God's not surprised. He's not surprised at all of the situation that you're going through, the circumstances that are at hand. God already knows. He already knows. He knows the beginning, He knows the middle, and He knows the end. Our job is to trust and know that God knows what He's doing and to believe. And so we're going to read today in Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 2. This scripture and this passage is familiar to most of us. Most of us know this passage pretty well because we studied it when we were in Sunday school or whatever. But it's the Moses story about how Moses went to Pharaoh to ask him to let the people go. Remember that story? Yes, this is that story. So it's just two verses I want to pick on today, but I encourage you to read the whole book of Exodus and to read the whole story of Moses so that you can get a full understanding of what I'm just talking about today. For the sake of time, I'm just going to read these first two verses and I'm going to expound on other things that are in this chapter, but I'm not going to read that. But I encourage you to go back to read it. It's important that you go back to read so you know what the word says for yourself. So Exodus chapter 4, verse 1 through 2. Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you?'" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. Yeah, that's it. That's simple, right? God is not surprised. God is not surprised. As we know the story of Moses, Moses was told to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let God's people go. We know that Pharaoh kept denying him and rejecting the request that was being made. But before we go into that, we have to understand the beginning that when God told Moses to do this, Moses was he kept coming up with excuses of why he couldn't do it because he didn't feel that he was, adequate enough for the job. He didn't feel like he was qualified for the job. He kept telling God, find someone else to, excuse me, find someone else to do the job because I'm not qualified. And so God said, I have a solution for the excuse that you have. Your brother's on his way over. I want you to tell him what I've told you, and he will have a heart to do it. And so when you tell him, I'm going to have you both go together, and Aaron will be your mouthpiece. So whatever I tell you, Moses, tell it to Aaron, and Aaron will be your mouthpiece. And I will teach and walk you both through this. And so that's like many of us today. We come up with excuses of why we can't, why we're not the chosen one for the job. We think about where we were raised and what we grew up in our communities and our environments, and why we are not the chosen one for the job. But we got to trust and know that when God gives us an assignment to do, that He knows what He's doing, and we have to trust and do what He has called us to do. Now, in reading this story, I understood that the the context of the story. I understood what God was telling Moses to do, but I also had to look at the process that uh, Moses had to go through. Um, I looked at the fact that God sent Moses to Pharaoh, but Moses kept being denied and he kept being rejected. And how many of us feel that way when we are doing our everyday thing, when we're trying to find a job or we apply for this position and, we keep being denied, we keep being rejected. Lord, how come I keep being rejected? You told me to do this. I told you from the get-go that I didn't feel like I was qualified anyways, but you're telling me to do this. Now that I'm doing it, I'm being rejected. But I still trust you. I'm going to continue to do what you said. I'm not going to give up. But I want to know today, where is our perseverance and tenacity as compared to Moses? Moses, he continued to do it regardless of what the outcome was. Although Pharaoh kept saying no, 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 and even though Moses kept showing the signs and all of those things, but Pharaoh kept saying no. So we have to continue to know that we have to persevere through all of that. We can't give up. We can't quit because we don't see it happening. God is not surprised of the results that you got from your doctor. God is not surprised from any of that. So what we got to do is trust and know that, hey God, I know you're the God that healeth thee. I know that you're the healer. I know that you said in your word that by your stripes we are healed. So what I'm going to do is stand on that word and not lean to my own understanding, but I'm going to lean on you, Lord. And so we got to trust and know, regardless of what the outcome looks like, regardless of how many no's we get, regardless of how much persecution you receive, or how bad you get talked about, because we know in this story that Moses had to be talked about because him going and being denied. I can imagine people laughing at him and making fun of him and mocking him, but that didn't stop him. And that can't stop us. When God tells us to do something, we have to do it regardless of what it looks like and regardless of how people laugh. Because God is not surprised of what they're going to do. He's not surprised of them mocking you and laughing at you, because God already knows the end, and He knows that He's going to bring the people out. And that's what we have to understand. We have to trust and know that when God tells us something, He already knows, and He's going to bring us out. And that's the story that I want us to focus on today, is that God already knows. He's not surprised. And so as as Moses continued to go to Pharaoh, and as he went and kept getting denied and rejected, God kept sending Moses. And as Moses had a heart to do what God had told him to do, and he kept going and going and going and going, when Pharaoh released the people, God was not mocked. God was not mocked, because God did what He said He was going to do, and He set the people free. And so, whatever, that's what I want to leave you with today. Whatever God is telling you to do it, regardless of what it looks like, how it feels, what people say. Uh, I don't care how many no's you get. If God has said, do this, it is imperative that you do it. Don't be disobedient and say, Lord, I tried. I did all that I can do. I tried. It is important that we do exactly what God tells us to do. And I read the first verse of Exodus chapter 1 through 2, because that is a very important piece to me when I read it. And it says, Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me, and they say, Lord, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. That made me think that what is in our hands? We have the Word. The Word is of God. And the staff that Moses had was his strength. And God has given us the Word. So we have to work the Word. And what we have in our hands, God has placed everything that we need in our hands. And we have to trust to know that. So this week, just remember that God is not surprised. Whatever you're facing, whatever you're going through, just know that He's not surprised, and you will come out all right if you continue to listen and adhere to what God is giving you to do. So this week, I want you to be blessed. Don't worry about nothing. Trust and believe and know that God will bring you through. He's not surprised. Until next week, love you much, and I'll talk to you soon.